Hi, this is Blue Phoenix. Some people like to call me Eric. The topic of the video this week is what is the difference between celibacy and asexuality? Now there's two major definitions for celibacy. One is the state of being unmarried, and the other is an abstention from sexual activity. I'm going to focus on the second definition. The first one really doesn't have anything to do with this topic of asexuality. Although some people, like religious people who quote the Bible, will say that celibacy is the state of being unmarried. They don't care about the sex part. But what I care about in this video is the sexual aspect of this. So the main difference here, celibacy is a conscious choice that a person can make. It can be a really difficult sacrifice for people when they do this for various reasons. Some of the reasons might be that somebody's entering the priesthood and Catholic priests have to take a vow of celibacy. A lot of other religious leaders have to take vows of celibacy when they take on those roles. It helps them stay devoted to their ministry, so to speak. I guess that's the main reason. Other people will be celibate because they're just waiting until marriage, potentially for religious reasons or otherwise. They just want to wait. Other people see it as not having sex will help keep a clear head so that they can make better decisions in their life, so they're not so worried about having sex all the time. It can also be a really good way to avoid getting sexually transmitted diseases, and it also prevents unwanted pregnancies, of course. If you're not having sex, you're not going to get pregnant. You can also, some people will do it for setting an example for other people that they care about. Like somebody might do it so that they can show their children that they really shouldn't be having sex. Especially if both single parents would probably do something like this. And the last reason that I'm going to mention here is just you don't really have a desire for sex, which this kind of does tie into asexuality. Asexuality is not a conscious choice, just like I didn't choose to have blonde hair or brown eyes or white skin. It's just the way that a person is. It's not something they chose, it's just something they were either born with or potentially like the nurture aspect kicked in, and for whatever reason just not interested in having sex. So asexuals can still choose to be celibate. They can also choose to not be celibate. One reason they might have sex would be to please a romantic partner, or maybe they want to procreate, they want to make a baby, so they choose to have sex. In that case, they're choosing not to be celibate. So in a way, it's still a choice for an asexual. They are kind of related in a lot of ways. I think an asexual is much more likely to be celibate, just because there's no underlying desire to do that. It certainly makes it a lot easier to do without. Some people, some asexuals are just celibate by convenience. It's just, well, I don't know. They never really thought about it. For me personally, it was more like that. It was just like, okay, I never really thought about it because I never really wanted to. So it wasn't like I sat down and said, you know what, I'm going to be celibate. Now, I will say that for an asexual, it's probably a lot easier psychologically. There's none of this struggle that most sexual people might feel because they really had this deep down desire to have it, whereas an asexual is perfectly happy without, in most cases. So to create kind of a silly analogy to help make this more clear, let's define a lack of desire to eat cake as asexuality, and a conscious choice to avoid eating cake as cakeabacy. All right. So imagine that you are somebody who just never really liked cake. You just never enjoyed it. You never had the desire to eat cake. That would make you an asexual. And there's people all around you that say, man, I love cake. I really love eating cake. You see ads on TV for cake. It just never really appealed to you, though. Other people out there think that maybe they should be avoiding cake. Their blood sugar's too high. They're getting fat, whatever. So they decide consciously, even though they like cake, they're going to avoid eating cake. They're adopting cakeabacy. Okay? So for people like that, it's a really difficult choice. They're like, man, I really want cake. They're used to eating cake every day. They're used to being around cake and just enjoying it, loving the taste. So for them, it's a real struggle for them to not eat cake. People around them are always talking about cake, and that just stirs up that temptation more for them, and it makes it that much worse, right? But for you, if you're a cakeule, so to speak, you just never wanted cake. There was really no temptation there to eat it. In some ways, you share a lot with that cakeabit person. You're both not eating cake. You've both chosen not to eat cake. But for you, being a cakeule, never really liking cake in the first place, it's not much of a struggle. And to further the analogy, maybe you make a friend who just really loves cake. They eat cake every day, and they want people around them to eat cake anytime they get together. And you just oblige because, well, you like this person, and you know that eating cake really makes this friend of yours happy. And maybe it doesn't bother you so much, so you just eat the cake. So you're not really cakeabit at that point. But you can see how in this case you are a cakeule and yet not cakeabit. So while that's a bit of a silly analogy, that might help make it more clear that asexuality and celibacy are not the same thing. They are somewhat related in that an asexual is more likely to be celibate. So I hope that helped, and we once again had some pretty good weather today. It rained a little bit, it's kind of warm, but otherwise not too bad. So I hope to catch you next time. See ya.